highway.
I know.
Which I gotta say is not bad when you can take the connector to get in the roll.
Wait a second.
Or so I was taking the connector.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Westford, I would like to welcome you to this evening's Candidates Night. My name is Laura Dickey. I currently serve as the League's spokesperson. We are proud to sponsor this event each year. This is our 48th annual Candidates Night, and some people say this might be our largest one yet. So, this year we have a very full slate of candidates. Because of this, we were only able to invite the candidates for contested races to this evening's event. I'd like to thank both the candidates who are here tonight and all the other candidates who are running. We appreciate the time and dedication it takes to serve the town and run for office. We invite everyone here tonight and watching from home to get to know your candidates, and then be sure to vote on Tuesday, May 2nd. In addition to appearing here tonight, candidates also had a chance to address voters by answering the questions found in this year's Voter's Guide. The Voter's Guide is available in this week's Westford Eagle, as well as on our website, lwv.westford.org. We encourage you to read those responses, particularly for the candidates in the uncontested races. This event is being broadcast live by Westford Cat on Wednesday, April 26th. It's also being taped for future rebroadcasting and viewing online. Candidates, both here and in the audience, these mics are for broadcast only. They will not make you louder in this room, so speak up. I just want to let, for people who might not know, a few words about the League. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men, and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. We always welcome new members, and membership forms are on the side table. I would also like to thank the Westford Water Department for the water bottles that are used by the candidates for the 4th year in a row. Candidates, those are yours to take. Please take them. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, there will be League members circulating in the audience with index cards. Please write your question on the card and turn it back into one of the runners. We may edit or combine questions for time, and all questions should be addressed to all candidates. Let us know what office you want the question addressed to, too, in case it's not clear. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Joanne Berry is a member of the Acton Area League of Women Voters, so she has no dog in this hunt. So, and is an experienced moderator. She's helped us out many, many times. So we are delighted to have her back to moderate Candidates Night. And this is going to be a busy one. So I'll turn it over to you, Joanne. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tonight we will have 3 panels of candidates. This panel has candidates for 2 offices. First 3 on left to right are for moderator. The other 2 are for Board of Health. Each candidate will have, do I need to yell more? It'd be better if I was standing up. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. We will follow with questions. There will be a 1-minute response time, so it's going to be kind of like a lightning round situation here. We have timers right down front who will let you know as your time is flowing. And if we could keep to time, we will be able to ask more questions. I know that the candidates here are running for different offices, but I might mix it up just to keep it a little more interesting. For the openings, I think it will be clear from the questions who's running for what. So we'll, for the opening statements, we'll just start on this end and work our way down. So Mr. Severo, go ahead for 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Tom Severo, and I would respectfully suggest that I've been preparing for the position of town moderator for the past 30 years, the first 18 of which I've served as a Westford resident, as a town meeting attendee, as an eventual voter, and I've seen firsthand how passionate people here are about their community, about their town government and politics. I know that Westford is a peaceable and tolerant community, and a community that I've come to love. For the latter 12 or so years in my professional career, I've developed a particular skill set that I think is something would be very suitable to be a moderator. I've worked in college admissions, which is really about being neutral, being unbiased, keeping my personal opinions out. I can't vote for somebody to get admitted because he runs track and I run track, or he wants to do political science. You got to make decisions that are the best for the school in the same way that you make decisions that are best for the town. I have experience as a lawyer, as a mediator, which is all about knowing the rules and following them. I can't tell you how much I've learned about Robert's Rules of Parliament in the past 2 months. And also as experience as a host and comedian, which again is about presenting, about public speaking, reading a room, being prepared for how a room might change. I guess Westford is a town where if you're serving as moderator, you need to be someone who can be respectful of opinions, even if I disagree with them, not let my personal politics interfere. If someone mentioned something at town meeting that I disagree with, I would go to that person individually to ask for clarification. I wouldn't try to summarize or edit anyone's personal views. And I think, in summary, for a moderator, we need a person who can be a person of neutrality in times of controversy and a person of integrity in times of chaos. And I think I'm just the man for the job.
Thank you. Mr. Sirianni.
Thank you to the league and to the voters for considering all of the candidates that you'll hear tonight. While no one can fill Ellen Hardy's shoes, I will strive to follow the steps that she has taken as moderator to make your town meeting successful. I want to share with you a sample of my service to Westford, my professional qualifications, and my objectives for the moderator position. First, I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen and the president of the Westford Kiwanis, the nonprofit organization that runs the Apple Blossom Parade and Festival. We're an organization dedicated to community service, helping children, seniors, and others in need in Westford. I served on the Westford School Committee, and I still actively volunteer with organizations such as Westford Against Substance Abuse, Scouting, and senior organizations in the area. I'm a former substitute teacher and a former trustee of Salem State College. Since 1995, I have worked in the state Senate as a chief of staff and as a legislative director for 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I know how important it is to value the voices of the majority as well as the minority. I have excelled as a public policy, budget, and parliamentary expert in the state Senate because I work to solve policy problems, not cause political ones. My objectives as moderator: to compose a finance committee that is unbiased, balanced, and well-informed, to conduct town meeting impartially, and to keep discussions and topics on time, and to contribute value to the town meeting process by assisting committees and boards wherever appropriate, and encouraging informed voter participation. My wife Debbie and I have loved raising our family in Westford. Our twins are part of an unbroken family line of Westford citizens that date back to the 1970s. Their unique family history compels me to act in good faith and with good intent for you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
Good evening. I am Susan Spooler, and I'm running for town moderator. I would like
Need to
thank.
talk a little louder.
Oh. Good evening. I am Susan Spooler, and I'm running for town moderator. I would like to thank the Westford League of Women Voters, the library staff, and Westford Cat, and all of you who are watching this event. I have lived in Westford since 2001. My town volunteerism includes serving on the Master Plan Implementation Committee as vice chair and as vice chair of the Registered Marijuana Dispensary Committee, where I assisted in the creation of Westford's 9-page bylaw pertaining to the usage conditions of medical marijuana dispensaries. I'm also a corporator for Emerson Hospital, representing Westford as an ambassador. Serving on these committees, studying town meeting time extensively, and attending copious town meetings has further enhanced my knowledge of Westford town government, as well as the committee members therein. I am fair, articulate, and have common sense. I run committee meetings with flair and authority. As an engineer, I am logical and think things through. As a technical sales executive, I utilize an important philosophy. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I listen twice as much as I speak. I am mindful and strategic. As town moderator, my goal will be to run town meeting efficiently and effectively. Everyone is equal and has the right to express their point of view. The length of town meeting can be compared to a pregnancy. A baby is born when he or she is ready. Town meeting ends when every article is addressed, every voter has the opportunity to share their opinion, and every vote is tallied. I will work closely with town hall employees and committee members to gather and organize the appropriate information for our town meetings. I've been attending town committee meetings, which include the school committee, selectmen, planning board, and zoning board, just to name a few. I'm familiarizing myself with all 78 town committees. Town moderator is a serious position and deserves someone with the time and talent to execute its responsibilities. I create my own schedule and work from home, making me available during the workday and evenings for any issues that need attention. I love Westford, and it would be my honor to serve you as town moderator. I thank you for your vote and your support.
Thank you. Ms. Belanger.
Good evening, and I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here for this great event. I have to start out by saying this is all kind of foreign. I'm not a politician. I'm a public health professional. And when I do talks and presentations, it's always on a public health topic. I can talk about public health because it's my chosen profession, and it's my passion. I've been working in public health for nearly 30 years. I have a degree in health administration with a concentration in public administration, a degree in nursing, and I'm a registered nurse. Early in my career, I was a health inspector. So I have inspected restaurants and enforced the state and federal food code. I've done housing inspections under Article 2, nuisance inspections under Chapter 11. I've inspected summer camps. I'm also a licensed soil evaluator, so I've spent many times logging soils and measuring deep holes for your septic systems, and also evaluating septic plans for compliance with Title V. I'm familiar with state, federal, and local regulations, and I have also written them, including reviewing state regulations for the isolation and quarantine regulations, and being on the original team for the tanning regulations in the state level. I am now currently the Assistant Director of Public Health, and I oversee many things on the clinical side of public health: communicable diseases, wellness clinics, immunizations, emergency preparedness, and emerging infectious diseases like Zika. In 2012, I was appointed by Governor Patrick to the Special Commission to conduct an investigation and study on the incidence and impacts of Lyme disease on the community. I'm very passionate about that. I'm not running for the Board of Health on a single issue. I am running because public health is my chosen profession and my passion. And I feel very strongly about all of the issues that fall under the Public Health Department. I was on the board for 12 years. I was known as Joanne Martell at the time. And I am very committed to keeping the town healthy and safe. I know the commitment that it takes to be on this board, and I want to give back to the community in the best way I know how. I know public health. I live public health, and I can live it every day, and I can hit the ground running.
Thank you. Mr. Shong.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shong Ha-Shong. I'm running for the Board of Health one-year term position. It's great honor and a very good experience to be here to meet other candidates and the audience. We have very dedicated and experienced candidates here. I'm sure I can learn a lot from them. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this event, also for the Westford CAD for broadcasting this one. And I also want to thank the audience, both here and at home, for the interest and participation. And Westford is a very nice town, and I think one of the things that attract people to here is its healthy environment. And my family and I enjoy the environment, and I feel I should do something to maintain this healthy environment. I think running and serving for the Board of Health is a very good way to contribute. If I have the opportunity to serve in the Board of Health, I would like to focus on three things. First, I would like to enforce all the applicable health and environmental standards. Second, I want to get involved early in the future business development to prevent potential environmental problems. Third, I want to advocate for drug-free community, especially for our children. I have a PhD degree in engineering and a very good training in science, and I have first-hand experience in environment management system, and I have 26 years of work experience. I can bring all this to table to help solve the health and environmental problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question will be for our moderator candidates. What is your experience with training and knowledge of the rules of the parliamentary rules that govern town meeting? Mr. Siriani.
Again, first I want to thank the League for organizing this event and for all the people attending and watching at home. I work in a legislative body, the state Senate, where I've been for more than 2 decades. Uniquely, I have a desk in the Senate chamber, and very few staff people do. My desk is right next to the Senate clerk, who has been the chief parliamentarian of the Senate for a very, very long time. As an attendee of town meeting, as a student of town meeting time, which is the guide that is the rule of process and order for our town meeting, clearly what we need is somebody who understands why these rules exist, and they exist so that we can find out what the majority opinion of town meeting is to adopt our business, and do so in an orderly procedure that is predictable so that voters know what to expect. That should be applied evenly and equally, and through my decades of training, that's exactly what I would like to do.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
My training of parliamentary procedure comes from attending copious town meetings, lots and lots of town meetings, and I have my own copy of Town Meeting Time. I've been talking to Ellen Hardy about this position for several years, and I received this copy from her last spring. And just from studying the book, studying Robert's Rules of Order, and being involved in other organizations where I implement Robert's Rules of Order, I feel that will help me to appropriately run town meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Severo.
I would say my training in that discipline comes from my background in studying political science, in studying comparative government, in studying law. I've also spoken at length with Ellen Hardy about Robert's Rules of Order. I've familiarized myself over the past 2 months watching videos, reading articles, making sure I know every point of order, point of privilege, and I'll be honest, I've become a lot more familiar with them over this time of my campaign. I would also respectfully suggest that it's not dissimilar to a comedy set. You know, you're proceeding through a town warrant, and you have to make sure that each thing gets its set time, and when it's time to move on to the next thing, you do, and you stick to that time, and you don't go over that. And I think that's important in town meeting.
Thank you. Next question will be for the Board of Health. In 1 minute, what are the greatest public health related issues facing Westford, and how should the board address them? Mr. Shong.
I think the biggest challenge for our town in terms of health is the potential pollution from industry, particularly the asphalt plant. People have okay.
That's not good. That you have to project,
Project
because
your
this
voice.
is only for TV.
Oh, okay. I think the biggest challenge now facing our town in terms of health is the potential pollution from asphalt plant. People are deeply concerned about this this possibility, and we have to address this concern. And I think if I have the opportunity to serve in the Board of Health, I can help in terms of the how to solve the problem, because it takes a lot of science and other skills to solve the problem. I would like to use the computer modeling and the actual measurement, the monitoring to tackle the problem. I have some trainings in that area. I think I can help.
Thank you. Ms. Belanger.
So, yeah, it doesn't work. Well, of course, I think we agree from a health standpoint that the environment is absolutely important. I was on the board 12 years ago. I was involved at the very beginning of the asphalt plant as it was coming to town, and I'll be as committed as I was then to keeping Westford healthy and safe. But also, I mean, there are other things that come into our day-to-day life. We have to make sure that our quality of food and our restaurant inspections are up to date and up to code, so that we can live healthily, that we have open space, that we can walk and breathe fresh air and exercise. So a lot of the health promotion programs that are happening in the health department now, through the school systems, through the the healthy eating and the nutrition, that's all important to keeping us as a community healthy. And those are the things that I will continue to go with.
Okay, thank you. Next question for our moderator candidates. What are your thoughts about your ability to be impartial and informed on issues that come before town meeting? And to maintain impartiality, are you committed to not voting on a matter that comes before town meeting? Ms. Spooler.
Impartiality. Having served on 2 committees here in town, I've learned the various aspects of people's opinions, and I feel that I would be able to be successfully impartial due to my overall experience working with the various committees and with observing all the various committees that the town has.
Thank you. Mr. Severo.
Sure. I think impartiality is probably the chief component of being a moderator. I think my background in law, specifically in mediation, has trained me well for that. I have to be prepared to sit by while people say things that I might not necessarily agree with and not, overreact. I have to keep a level head. I have to make sure that, things move forward. And, oftentimes, specifically in mediation, which I think is probably the best, my best background to draw upon for this particular question, I do have very strong personal views about something, and sometimes it's difficult to not let those interfere. But ultimately, the goal of the mediation is to just be a facilitator and let things move forward without injecting yourself into the conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Sirianni.
Well, I think the question is very important because inherent in it is being well informed as a moderator, which suggests that you should understand all of the articles that are on the warrant and the motions that might come. And that means doing your research, checking in with the relevant boards, town staff, and citizens, making yourself available to citizens in advance of town meeting to address any procedural questions. But can you do that and be impartial? And I think you can and must. We've had an excellent model for a very long time of someone who's achieved that. The notion is be well informed, be available to citizens, and be impartial. My pledge would be that no one will ever know how I would have voted if I was on the floor of town meeting. I think it's important that everybody has a chance to have their say, but not be influenced by a moderator. The moderator should facilitate the wisdom of town meeting and the town's voters.
And I think, aside from you, the other 2 candidates did not answer, would you be committed to not voting? So I'll just...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I was looking at the time.
For the Board of Health candidates, what part does nutrition play in the health of residents? Ms. Belanger.
As a nurse, nutrition is hugely important in what I do on a day-to-day basis in my job and in my training. And important in terms of not just, are you healthy as a person, but are we healthy as a community? The gardens, for instance, the fact that we have the public gardens and people are out growing things together is a great community project. We need to constantly be aware of what we're putting into our bodies. That also goes, again, to just good general health. That's something that is taking part on the Board of Health right now, working with the schools. And in terms of the senior, and we do projects in terms of keeping the seniors healthy as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chong.
Yes, I think nutrition is a very important factor in health, keeping people healthy. And for the nutrition, I think we need to have the right quantity, the right mix. We need to have balanced diet. And another important factor is we need to have a very healthy food source, not contaminated food source. And to start with, I think that has to do with the environment. If our environment is contaminated, we cannot guarantee the food is healthy. So that's my take. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne, can I answer the nutrition question too?
Neutrality.
Wait a minute.
I think we'll just move on. Moderators, nutrition, I don't know, you know. Though we had snacks
Food
at
for
our
thought.
food meeting, at our annual meeting this year.
Don't look at
in
the
Acton.
brownies in the back. They're,
Okay.
They're carrots.
Next question for moderator. Given that the moderator appoints members to the Finance Committee, what credentials and qualities will you look for when you are seeking candidates for appointment to the FinCom, and how will you make residents aware of those opportunities in order to attract the most qualified candidates? Mr. Severo.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing for the Finance Committee is people who are aware of all the issues that are going on in town, and I would certainly seek to reach out to people who are currently involved in it, certainly rely on people. I know Ellen Hardy will be a mentor for anyone in this position, but reach out to people who are interested in the position, who know about what's going on in town. I think it's important to have mentors in this field for issues that, you know, I might not personally be aware of, and to rely on for what their credentials are and see, you know, who's going to make the best decisions, and again, be neutral, because the Finance Committee is going to make important decisions for the town, but we want to make sure that all sides are represented so that we don't have people who are completely on one side or the other side in terms of fiscally conservative, fiscally liberal decisions. So again, I think being neutral, being moderate, and selecting candidates who would reflect that moderacy is an important part of the job as well.
Thank you. Mr. Siriani.
The Finance Committee is functioning very, very well in Westford. So if it isn't broke, don't fix it, is where I would start. One of the first jobs of moderator after the election will be to appoint the retiring members whose terms will expire at the end of June. So the job starts right away before town meeting. First, we want to find people who are willing to serve. In the book that we all receive, page 1 is an application to become an active citizen in Westford. We have an excellent Finance Committee. They and anybody that serves on the Finance Committee that I might appoint will want to engage in balancing our budgets and promoting excellence. Finance for municipalities and government is a little different than businesses, so we're looking for people with deep talent, a deep interest, that they'll listen to town departments, town committees and boards and citizens, and that will serve with integrity.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
Okay. I would, for the Finance Committee, I would choose a variety of people. Every year, 3 new people are appointed or reappointed to the Finance Committee. I would want to have a variety of people who are young, who are seniors, someone who owns a gas station perhaps, a CPA, an attorney. I'd want to have a variety and have people of different races as well. As well as in regards to how would I get the word out that we were looking for folks, I'd want to advertise on Westford Cat, the Lowell Sun, the Westford Eagle, and let everyone know that they would have an opportunity to serve on the committee and choose that way.
Thank you. For the Board of Health. How can the Board of Health improve the health and lives of our senior population? Mr. Shong.
I think for senior people to maintain their health, and there are 2 important things. One is diet, the other is exercise. For diet, the senior people may have different needs than younger people, and we have to cater to their special needs. And also for the exercise, they need to have moderate but sustained exercise, I mean regular exercise. So they don't have to exercise like a professional athletes, but they do need exercise. And those 2 things will keep them healthy. And of course, they need to have the help from healthcare professionals to have regular physical examination and monitor of their health. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Belanger.
So, again, I'm going to go back to my public health and nursing background. Part of an important part of keeping our seniors happy and healthy is socialization. So I truly believe that we need to work with the Council on Aging on the programming that they offer there, and where the health department and the staff can enhance that or even bring in new programming, whether it be screenings or blood pressure checks or again, nutrition and exercise. Those things, we certainly do agree on all of that. I think it's very important that we keep our seniors engaged and involved. They are our wisdom for the town. They have been living here and they know what has happened before, what works and what doesn't, and we need to constantly keep them involved in the community and treat them with the respect they deserve.
Thank you. Our next question for moderator candidates. As moderator, how will you ensure that all participants in town meeting feel respected? Mr. Sirianni.
I think the answer to that is before town meeting even occurs. And that means making sure all of the relevant material that a voter would want is made available to them. The opportunities to learn about this town and what takes place on town meeting floor have been growing over the years as electronic media and other channels have increased. I think that can be enhanced further. The opportunities for citizens to be a part of town meeting are incredibly important. I was looking recently at the list of people eligible to register to vote, those who are registered to vote, those who participate in a municipal election, those that attend town meeting, and those that actually speak or are directly involved in town meeting. And it dwindles, but that doesn't mean it's not healthy. It is healthy when people come and attend, and they will be best town meeting members when they are prepared, and my job would be to help them to be.
Thank you, Mr. Severo.
Sure. I first want to say I think it's a great question. I don't know if this was an audience question. I think that's a great question because I think people need to be respected. People need to feel that they are respected in order to have an efficient and productive town meeting. I think when things get most contentious, when we get bogged down, when town meeting drags too long, is when people sometimes feel that they haven't been heard or they've been spoken over, and that can, cause difficulties in the meeting in general for everyone. So I think there's a balance in terms of, a strict adherence to the rules and saying, if I cut you off exactly at 3 minutes, it's not because I don't like you, it's because everybody gets 3 minutes. But also being able to read the room when that changes, because as we know in Robert's Rules of Order, there are times when the meeting can decide, hey, we want to keep talking about this, and you have to be able to acknowledge that and say, if this is a point we want to continue on, does anyone want to make a motion for that? And you have to be amenable when the room changes to change with the room.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
You were asking how would people feel respected. I think that being a courteous person as a moderator and to project that courtesy to them in making them feel that they're important, that what they have to say is important, and listening to them. And I know some people get very upset about certain situations, and as long as they're keeping on task, and we will, they'll be listened to, and I think that just being kind to them is very, very important. So.
Okay, thank you. For Board of Health, what actions would you propose to protect the public health in areas of groundwater quality, public and private well water safety, as well as septic system maintenance? Ms. Belanger.
So I do have background in training and a licensed soil evaluator for the septic systems. There are state regulations already on the books. It's Title V. I'm sure everybody knows about it. And those are we do have to follow the laws of the state. And we do have local regulations in place to protect the groundwater. In fact, at the moment, the Board of Health is looking to rewrite the well water regulations. The state is also coming out with the Department of Environmental Protection is coming out with a new set of well regulations that the Board of Health is looking at in terms of adopting for the town. So water is very, very important. Obviously, it's essential to life, so we need to protect it and make sure that it's safe. And in terms of septic systems, we need to follow our state regulations, and if things need to change, we can enhance by local regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Sean.
Oh, yes. I think for the water, groundwater, that's the water source of our drinking water. And we get our drinking water from the water aquifer, and we need to protect the water source. And within the certain range, we shouldn't have the contaminations and pollution sources like the some industrial activity, which would produce contaminants, should be far away from the water source, and also the forest, and it should be there, and that also protect the water source, because the groundwater actually comes from the surface and then drain down. And for septic system and well, I think we have a very strict regulation from our states. We just need to stick to it and follow it step by step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Back to moderator candidates. What are your ideas for making town meeting run more efficiently and fairly? And that's, I'm sure, a relative term. Mr. Severo.
Sure, I think, as I alluded to in my last response, there's a certain aspect of strict adherence to the rules that really can make sure everything is fair and you're not playing any personal favorites. I think you have to make sure you're hearing equally from both sides. One of the things Ellen, I know, has always been big on is not unless you're going to add something new to the conversation. I know we've all heard her say that many times. So really, I think everybody thinks sometimes that they have something new because I'm saying this from my perspective, but really making sure ahead of time that the comment is going to be a new piece of information that can help town meeting, is going to help us not get bogged down in the weeds too much, and is hopefully going to make everybody feel, respected, that I'm not cutting you off because I don't like you again, but because this is really a piece of information that maybe we've heard in a different form before.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
Okay. Noticing the various articles that end up being hot items, I'd like to suggest that ahead of time, people that are for and against a certain topic get together and have meetings prior to town meeting, something along the lines of League of Women Voters. That way, they can all combine their information, and then they can present them and we can have it televised, so then people can be informed ahead of town meeting, and then people won't be up there asking question after question after question, and they'll have an opportunity to know X and Y regarding an issue that's rather contentious here in town. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Sirianni.
Joanne, could you repeat the question,
Sure.
please?
So, what are your ideas for making town meeting run more efficiently and fairly?
Thank you. So the League of Women Voters does an excellent job in advance of town meeting already, and I've been enjoying presentations that show up on Westford Cat. The town meeting does work very, very well as it is. There are some things that can help us to run more effectively and fairly, and that is, and I know that because I've talked with voters who have attended town meeting to gather what their actual experiences are. First of all, sometimes motions get complicated. Some additional visual aids, I think, would help. We do have a projector and a screen, but additional visual aids would help. Being able to sense the town meeting, not from, and I don't mean that in the sense of town moderator, but as town meeting attendee, is very difficult often to hear when speakers are there. So I think there are some physical efficiencies we can do to make the experience more inviting. Visual aids, creating opportunities for people to have access to childcare on site means they can come and participate. All of those things will create less interruption in the flow of town meeting, and I hope make us more efficient and effective.
Thank you. Next, for Board of Health. How is the opioid crisis in Massachusetts affecting Westford, and how can the Board of Health help? Mr. Shong.
I think the opioid crisis is very bad in some areas of the country. In our area, I read some study regarding the Greater Lowell area. The opioid related death is going up, and it's trending up. It's a very bad trend, and we need to work to stop that. I think the Board of Health and other all the related parties, like the Board of Selectmen, the police department and the school system can all work together to solve the problem. And it's not, it's very important. And we can, if we work together, we can stop it. Thank you.
Ms. Belanger.
So under the auspices of the Board of Health is WASA. I'm hoping you're all familiar with that acronym. It's the Westford Against Substance Abuse Group. We've had a group in Westford for many, many years that has worked with all different types of substance abuse and is working right now in terms of the opioid crisis as well. We have a coordinator that works with the health, that works under the health, as a staff of the health department, that works with the high schools and the grammar schools and does a fabulous job in terms of looking at all types of substance abuse, alcohol and other drugs. That's an important part of our community that we need to enhance and to follow through. They work with the police department and other boards in town. And to remember that, you know, the opioid crisis has to be treated as it is. It is a disease and it needs treatment as well as counseling.
Thank you. For moderator candidates, I'm going to combine a couple of thoughts here. Similar though. Given Westford's expanding population, what is your opinion about open town meeting continuing to serve its citizens? Is there any point at which you feel a transition to representative meeting would be beneficial, but how, what are your ideas to get a larger audience and more representation from all areas? Those do kind of go together there. Ms. Buhler.
Okay. Being familiar with the town of Natick, and they have representatives for their town meeting. I think with Westford, being the size that it is, about 22,000 right now, that people who come to town meeting are very passionate about it, and I don't see at this point in time that those who attend town meeting would want to be represented by anyone but themselves. In time, and so, you know, in time, you know, if we ever grew to over 30,000 people, I think that may well be something that we would have to consider would be the representative model that towns like, for example, Natick implement. So.
Okay, Mr. Sirianni.
Massachusetts has 351 cities and towns, and about 300 of those communities are towns. Of that subset, there are about 30 that have a representative form of town meeting. And it can work. Lexington has it, Chelmsford has it. We don't. And I'm actually very glad Westford has an open form of town meeting. If you're a registered voter, you can come and participate. If you're a citizen and not a voter, you can still come and observe, and maybe you'll become a voter and a participant as well. We've studied this question as a community, and in 2008, there was a very well run and detailed study on should we consider having representative form. I was glad that through that exhaustive analysis, they found that no, an open form does work best. I think it is an example that the best type of government is the one that is the closest to the people, and we don't need filters. I'm sure you don't. It works well.
Thank you, Mr. Severo.
Sure. I would say I might differ from my colleagues slightly here in that I do see maybe at some point in the future, maybe in the distant future, we might want to look toward moving toward a representative model. I think one of the things that you notice about town meeting now is it's not often people come in the morning and stay through the whole meeting. There are certain issues that people feel very passionate about, and the gym clogs up because everybody knows our issue's coming up at 11 o'clock, and it's not really decided by the town meeting as much as it's decided by these 300 people who clogged in at this one time. I think in terms of getting a larger representative of the people to make those decisions, we might be able to do something in terms of an online communication where we could maybe have people post pro and con ahead of time and say maybe these are my thoughts going in why I would vote against, these are my thoughts why I would vote for, and people might be able to participate that way instead of having to sit through and listen to everybody's comments. We could go online and see what people wrote in comment sections and maybe be more efficient and include a larger sample of the population that way as well.
Okay, thank you. This will be, I believe, our final question for Board of Health. Running, walking, etc. on our town roads with no sidewalks is not safe. You guys don't know why there are so few sidewalks, but what could be done to address this situation, that there aren't adequate sidewalks? Ms. Belanger.
Okay, we'll make sidewalks a public health issue. And it is, from a safety standpoint, we want people to be out walking, riding their bikes in safety. I happen to live in a section of town that I do not have a sidewalk, yet my children went to the grammar school that was like I could literally see it from the top of my street, but I would never have allowed them to walk there without a sidewalk. So, I guess in essence, it is a public health issue in terms of how are we keeping people safe as they're out and trying to enjoy the environment, and how they are trying to get exercise, whether it even be people that are out running. So we can make that a public health issue, and we can certainly advocate for more safer places that we can walk and enjoy the town.
Thank you. Mr. Schoen.
Yeah, I noticed that there are areas without sidewalks. I think we can add sidewalks gradually, and we can, the Board of Health can work together with the Planning Board to build sidewalks one by one. I don't think that's going to happen overnight because it involves the budget and fund and a lot of work projects. And I think some areas it's heavily wooded. We have to cut some trees, which add more work. So we can do that. We just need a good plan. We need to get involved with the planning board to add the sidewalks one by one. And also we have some very nice areas with sidewalks and with some recreational facilities. We can enjoy that and to improve our health.
Okay, thank you. Our final question for moderator candidates. At this year's town meeting, we took items out of order to discuss articles at time certain. How did you think this worked, and would you repeat it? Mr. Sirianni.
I noted with interest that Ellen said this was unique in her career, 25-year-long career as a moderator. So I think it was exceptional. I think it's important to have some level of predictability for voters, but at the same time, I don't think any moderator should ascribe exactly the sequence of events. Town meeting should do that, and you have the opportunity by particular motions to take things up as the majority of the town meeting members would like to. So I think the model is to design the warrant in a logical way, a predictable way, and let the town meeting members decide for themselves collectively the order and the nature that you want to get into it. And I think that works best.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler.
Going back to my prior comments with making people more in tune and to be more informed as to what's going on with the various articles, having anything out of order would have to be a special situation like we had at the prior town meeting. I know that certain towns like Hull will do a lottery as to how they put their articles in order. So, in essence, if there was a certain situation in which I had to make a decision to put something out of order, I would do it with very careful consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Severo.
I would say I would be respectful of the order, but not a slave to the order. And I think you need to really read the room and how things are progressing. And at certain times, if it makes more sense to take the clot out and let the blood flow through the meeting and discuss something in kind of a separate
No, that's a health
circumstance.
issue.
Yeah, is that for the health? Am I overstepping? But yeah, I think it worked well when we did it. I wouldn't say I would abuse that. I would say, again, echo my colleagues' statements that, it would be particularly special situations, but I think it has its time, it has its place, and I think it worked well when we did use it at this most recent town meeting.
Okay, that brings us to the close of this panel. So thank you to all of the candidates for coming tonight. And our next panel are the candidates for Board of Selectmen.
We can bring the water back.
While we're switching around here,
Butter.
I just want to make a quick statement. You may have noticed that even though there are 2 candidates for the 3-year planning board seat, one of the candidates, Gary Lavelle, was unable to attend and has provided the following statement to the league. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, I will be removing myself from the race for the 3-year term on the planning board. I will be remaining active in the community as president of the Westford Business Association and continue with my seat on the Permanent Town Building Committee. Although we cannot televise a forum that only has 1 candidate in attendance, we will have time at the end of the evening to hear a statement from the other candidate for this planning board seat, Tom Spuler. So I'll remind you again at the end of the evening, once we stop taping, Tom will make a statement. I also remind you that we have runners. Runners, could you raise your hands so people know? Right here and here, if you have a question, to write it down on a card. We can't guarantee that we'll get to everyone's, but we will try to combine and edit as best we can.
Alrighty, let's come back to order, please.
So, main event, yeah.
Okay, as with the previous panel, the candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 1 minute for response to questions. Your timer is right here. At least one candidate wishes to stand in order to be heard for his opening, and that is fine. We'll start at this end, work our way down, and have random order as we proceed through the questions. Go ahead, Ms. Almeida.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to all the citizens who came out this evening to hear from the candidates. I'm running for office because Westford is ready for a new generation of leadership. I'm a mom of 2 small children who attend the Miller School. I'm a small business owner. I own Fat Moon Farm, where I grow gourmet mushrooms for local restaurants. I am also a community volunteer and have been the chair of the Agriculture Commission for the past 3 years. I'd like to tell you a story about how I got involved with the Agriculture Commission. As a farmer here in town, people kept telling me you should get on the Agriculture Commission. So I looked into it. I learned that the commission hadn't even met in 5 years. It took a while for me to even get to a meeting because they weren't having regular meetings, but I got my application in, and at that first meeting they said, who's going to chair the commission? So I immediately raised my hand, because if I'm going to get involved in a project, you can bet that I'm going to be there 110%. 3 weeks after that initial meeting, the Agriculture Commission was presenting at the Strategic Planning Retreat. I took that as an opportunity to ask the community, what would you like us to work on? Community gardens came up as the #1 priority. Over the next less than a year, we were able to open the gardens by working with nearly every town department, committee, and commission. And we started with 100 plots at the Day Field at the bottom of Graniteville Hill. Now, 3 seasons later, we're expanding the garden to 250 plots. So I share this story with you because to me it demonstrates my leadership, my style of leadership, and my involvement in the community. So first of all, I believe in collaborative leadership, where everyone comes to the table, everyone has a voice. I think good leadership has open communication, where everyone is heard and listened to. And finally, I wanted to tell you that part of the story is that I'm a doer. If I'm going to get involved in a project, I want to be involved in something that's going to have a positive impact on our community. So thank you for coming tonight and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Clay.
Thank you. I'd like to join the chorus of people thanking the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Joan, for hosting this excellent event. My name's Tom Clay, and I'd like to be your selectman and ask for your vote. My wife Sarah and I have been proud to call Westford our home for the past 15 years, and 2 of our 3 daughters were born here, so they're natives. I'd like to build on the things that make Westford great and build a strategic roadmap to address some of the important issues that will define our future. How do we do that? Well, we draw on the talents of everybody and draw everyone into the conversation. And as a school committee member and as chair of the school committee, I worked very hard to bring in as many voices as possible and really invite people into the dialogue, and that's something that I want to pursue as your selectmen. We want to take on big challenges that we face, like I did as a U.S. Army Ranger. During the time on school committee, we took on some big challenges, I think successfully. I think we have to be ready to ask those big questions and look carefully at some of the big issues that we face. We need to think creatively and understand the details. I'm a CEO of 2 tech companies, not at the same time, first one, then the other. And I've had to both think big picture, but also these have been small companies, especially at the beginning, and I've had to really get in the details to understand. So I'm comfortable with detail. And we need to be ready to innovate, as I do as an entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School, coaching teams on commercialization of technology. So where should we focus? We need to maintain the excellence of the Westford schools. It's a very important part of our community, and I want to make sure that the students 10 years from now have all the same great opportunities that our students do today. We need to preserve our rural New England character and continue to protect our green spaces. I think we need to have a solution for the Drew Farms property that we're all really excited about, that we feel generations from now will look back on and be proud of. We need to pursue new resources and explore all the different ways that we can bring revenue in. I serve on the Marlborough Economic Development Council, and there are a lot of good ideas there that I think we can bring to bear. And I want to make sure that Westford works for all the residents here, including our seniors, including our young families. With that, I thank you for your attention and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, League of Women Voters, and thank you, Westford CAT, for covering this. My name is Dennis Galvin, and I'm a candidate for the Board of Selectmen. My experience has taught me that virtually every issue in Westford can be basically boiled down to one: growth. I have worked for the last 12 years with many of you to try to manage and direct that growth while preserving the best that is Westford. But I have learned that neither the planning board or any other board in town that deals with growth management can be effective unless they have the full support of the Board of Selectmen. The decision to settle with the asphalt plant revealed a deficiency in that support to me, and I think I'd like to correct that. Now, my experience has taught me that in every election, there are basically 2 competing visions of Westford that are at play. The first sees Westford as a commodity, a profit center, a place where special interests can capitalize on the quality of life that other folks have been able to build. The other vision is that of a community where people work, live, and interact with one another. They share a common concern for each other and an appreciation for the natural beauty and sense of place that is Westford. I have always worked to build Westford as a community. Now, growth is inevitable and it's necessary, but the changes that it drives should always involve the people's consent and the actual input at the final decision. Now, Westford has changed a lot in the 40 years since my wife, Kathy, and I have moved here. It has become it is very diverse. And it is very important that as a town, we recognize that and insist upon inclusion in the appointments to our town government and our town committees and our town commissions. So my last statement is simply this. I'm asking for your vote on May 2nd to be selectmen so we can put the board into a leadership position to protect and preserve Westford. I will listen, I will be fair, and I will work very hard to make sure that the best of Westford is available to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First question. What would be your top 3 priorities as selectmen, and how would you work with other board members to achieve these goals? Mr. Clay.
I think the first is one of climate. I'd want to make sure that there was a very open feeling and people felt invited into the process. I think the town boards can be intimidating and it can be sort of rule-based, and I think there's a great opportunity for us to bring in some of the new voices. One of the best days I've had in Westford politics lately was at the special town meeting to see all those people that had not been at town meeting before be there and participate. So first and foremost, I want to be inclusive. I also think it's important that we pursue different forms of revenue. I think there's a lot of economic development opportunities in Boston using the existing zoned areas to get better occupancy and better corporate citizens. And I also think it's important that we take a long look at the town services that we're going to need. Westford 10 years from now is going to look different than today. I think we're going to be better served when we build a strategic plan that looks at first responders, looks at all the resources that we need, and lays that out in a steady sequence so we're not trying to solve a problem in a crisis. We're getting ahead of it.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin.
Yes. The first major issue I see is the problem of restoring trust and confidence in the town government. Now, during my campaign, I've had the pleasure of walking to about 1,000 doors. I've covered Precinct 6 fairly well. I can tell you that there is a lot of distrust and an unsettled attitude about the Board of Selectmen. We need to address that and try to change that. Secondly, we do have the challenge of trying to ensure quality services while watching and being physically responsible, which will be a lot of work. I think that's very important. And third, your previous guest that we discussed touched on the issue of basically health and safety, particularly for our children, which involves such issues as traffic, sidewalks, motor vehicle accidents, opioid abuse, marijuana legalization, and also violence. These things are all things that are going to challenge our children, and we need to be able to take steps, affirmative steps, to act very, very boldly to try to address them.
Thank you. Ms. Almeida.
Thank you. So my first priority would be to work on the issue of trust and communication. That's the #1 thing I've heard from residents, and I think the Board of Selectmen need to be proactive in how we communicate with folks and look for new ways to reach more people in the town. I represent a group of a demographic of folks that they don't have time to read through every agenda, and so I think we need to find ways to make the information more consumable so that folks can stay informed and not feel like they have to click through every 3 clicks to get to the bottom of an agenda to make sure that they don't miss something that they're interested in. My second priority would have to do with strategic planning for the town. You may have heard that there are several hundred housing units proposed over on 110, 40B projects that are coming up. I think we need to look ahead at how we're going to staff our schools and first responders and highway department to ensure that we can maintain the high level of services that we enjoy. And my third priority would have to do with land preservation. One of my favorite things about Westford is the open space that has been preserved here, the enjoyment of that space, and I would work to continue to preserve land. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. How would you approach enforcing the APRs on the Drew Farms land at 6668 Boston Road? Mr. Galvin.
Yeah. Well, the APRs are restrictions. That means they are restrictions. So the only way that they can be dealt with is if somebody wants to apply to take those off. I believe we have to enforce those restrictions. I'm a big supporter of zoning protection and adhering to zoning, because your property values, all of your property values, are only as good as the zoning enforcement that goes around you. If people can flip zoning and can change zoning, you're going to wind up in a situation where your property values could be reduced. So we have to enforce the APRs. It's very important to maintain that, and to also enforce the zoning situation that is in that area, if you're referring to Boston Road, which is agricultural and residential, not commercial.
Thank you, Ms. Almeida.
So if anyone tuned into the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, I think there was a very productive conversation that happened with the landowner and the Board of Selectmen and the community members who were there. And what came out in the meeting was there was back and forth about the soil that was there, soil that's going to be brought in, improvements to the farmland. And late in the conversation, I got up and asked about the USDA soil plan that is required in the APR. Come to find out, neither the Board of Selectmen nor the landowner really understood what that tool was. And as the conversation moved forward, everyone realized that this is a really useful, effective tool. And we can use the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service of the USDA. We can use their tools to help the landowner and help the town understand how we protect the value in that land. I would like to work collaboratively with the landowner to ensure that he does farm it and is successful there. I think we all understand that that's in our best interest, to see the land farmed and to be supportive of a farming operation there.
Thank you. Mr. Clay.
I think we've all heard loud and clear that the town sees that parcel as a real treasure, something we want to be proud of now and proud of in 25 years. The APRs are fairly clear. It's one of the roles of the Board of Selectmen is to enforce those. So I do think there's an important enforcement and compliance regime that needs to get firmly established, and I think some progress has been made on that so far. I also want to make sure we're spending time, though, on thinking about what the big vision can be for that parcel. I think that can really be an incredible resource for us. I think it's something that we can be, rather than just be reactive to what's being pitched to us, I think we can think a little bit about what that could really be for the town, and then go to the existing owner and see if that's something that he's willing to participate in. So for every minute of compliance that we spend, which is important, I'd also like to make sure we're spending some time thinking about how can we really make that something that we're proud of, because I think it's a big opportunity.
Thank you. Next. Under what circumstances would you support a 2.5 override? Ms. Almeida.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Okay, under what circumstances would you support a 2.5 override? Ms. Almeida.
Sure, I would support a 2.5 override if it's well researched and documented that that is the only way to achieve a specific goal and objective for the town. And the beauty of the 2.5 override is that the community gets to decide. So the selectmen say, yes, we will take it to the community and allow you to decide. And my opinion is that if the school committee or another board that has that authority comes to the selectmen and says, and tells us that the only way we can solve this problem is with a 2.5 override, will you allow us to go to the community and ask the community if they would like to increase their taxes for this purpose? Then I would say yes, because I think that's the selectmen respecting another board in town.
Thank you. Mr. Clay.
I think that I would support a 2.5 override if I felt that the background data and the work had been very thorough, that the process had been open, and that it really was the best alternative and maybe the only alternative to solving the problem. I mean, there's a reason that the override process exists. It exists so that when certain issues come up, you, the voters, get to weigh in and say, yes, this is an important enough priority for us that we want to act on it. And I think if you use the school override that's before us as an example, there was an enormous amount of data collected across a wide range of data sets. There were 10 or more public meetings that were covered extensively in the media, lots of debate, lots of people involved from the community, and in a careful, thorough look that said the only way we can address this issue is with an override. There's not another budgetary method that we can do without making huge sacrifices to services. So I think in that case where you've had a thoughtful, careful run-up with an open process, and it's been determined that's really the only way to solve the problem, then I would support a 2.5 override.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin.
Okay. I support an override in only some very rare cases. The situation would have to be imminent and it would have to be critical. With regards to the present override, there is an issue with this because the situation that I view it is I view the power to tax is the power to destroy. There are people that are going to be impacted by this. So we have an obligation as a town that before we try taxation, that we actually try to expend and expend every effort that we can to try to achieve the financial goals that we're looking for before taxing. One of those things is we should at least make sure we complete the collective bargaining process, and that is not the case in this particular current override. No one can come to you and say that they have tried to achieve, they need to have a tax increase, and that there's no last resort if they have not been willing to go through the collective bargaining process. So I would call that whole thing into question, and I would say that we need to do more work before we ever come before the people to ask them for a tax increase.
Could I respond to a kind of a fact issue?
Yes.
As a rebuttal? So this whole override for the schools actually went through 2 negotiating cycles. Last negotiating cycle, we used every available technique. We exhausted everything we could, and then only in this current one brought it forward. I'll also say that if you're a town body in a negotiation, you can't close a contract unless you get access to the funds. And so it is important, and the only way from vast study, lots of discussion, we found that we could move through this is if we did it concurrently with an open negotiation. And I'm quite confident that's the case.
May I respond to that? Well, wait a minute. He just made a point that I'd like to counter.
Maybe the big bucks here.
And it'll take me 30 seconds.
So just hold your horses here. I get the big bucks to come over here. So since there is a question of fact, this is not a debate, you may only rebut on factual information.
That's right.
Okay.
First of all, number one, there is no comparison between the negotiation that went on here and an actual collective bargaining negotiation. It's much more rigorous and much more comprehensive. Second of all, there was a change.
Okay, now we're entering into debate.
I'm not sure.
That's all I'll say.
So I think we're just going to end that question now.
All right.
Moving on. And there's plenty of people that will be hanging around afterwards.
I'm sure.
So, on a completely different topic, how will you get to know the concerns of newer people in town who are currently less involved in the town governance? Mr. Clay.
I'm really glad you asked that question. It's been really exciting for me to see communities coming to town meeting, coming to meetings that I've not seen as part of the process before. I've had a chance to meet with the Chinese American organization that's really come together and look carefully at these issues. We all were able to participate with them, and that was a great opportunity for us. Also, we've been able to meet with the Indian American community, I think all of us have also had that opportunity. So it's, how do we do it? We go out and ask. We show up, we go to town events, we talk to people, we make ourselves available. We let people know that they're invited into the process and that we're excited to have that conversation. I think we're seeing the beginning of something pretty exciting here in Westford, and seeing a lot of new faces and a lot of new excitement in the town process.
Thank you, Ms. Almeida.
So I'd like to answer this question by asking the last time you've heard of a selectman going to a play group. The playground, the nursing moms group. You know, these are groups in our town that feel underrepresented. And I have watched my children play while I talk with other parents about what's happening in our town. And they ask me, so what is happening at the Drew Garden property? What is the status of the asphalt plant? They have questions. So one of the ways I would represent people that are newer to town is that I know these folks. They're people that I see on the weekends. They're people my children play with. And the second way that I would do this is by offering that once a month I'll be available. I will have open hours at the senior center, at Muffins on Main, at various places around town, different times a day, so that folks know that they can always come and see me and talk to me and express their concerns and hopes for the town.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin.
Okay. One has to take an active effort to get out and find out what's going on. I recently did that and have been doing that on my campaign, and I'll continue to do this as Board of Selectmen. And as a case in point, I was recently down at Indian Ridge, and I am now aware of the fact that there is an issue down there involving the inability of our school buses to serve the school population. They'll only come in so far, and as a result, there is a big buildup of young kids down there trying to get on those schools. It has to be horrendous in the wintertime, all right? There are issues like that all over town. I have heard from several people that are telling me their streets haven't been paved. That you have to get out and engage the community. The idea of business hours is an excellent idea, but it has to be the type of a temperament of the person that's out there. I enjoy this. This is I have the time to do it, and I still have my health, thank goodness, and I would like to get out there, and I will get out and be a proactive member of this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, how would you address the process of cell phone companies applying for towers in Westford? Ms. Almeida.
Well, I think that's not an issue in terms of process. That's not an issue that the Board of Selectmen decide, and I think that's an area where we have to respect the other boards and commissions in town and allow those groups to make those decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin.
Cell phone towers are a problem, and the problem is that they're protected under the federal law. We do have one crack at them, and that is they must come before the planning board for site plan review, and if they're extremely outlandish, and one was described as a scene from Invasion from Mars, that's how big it was, we have the ability to be able to stand up to it, but we have to be prepared to stand up to it, which goes back to my earlier remarks. We have to be willing, if necessary, to defend the decisions of the boards if they reject these. And we've had a little problem with that recently. Thank you.
Mr. Klein.
Yeah, I think the way that the Board of Selectmen weighs in on that is for the planning board to know that we'll have their backs and that we'll be prepared, as Dennis points out, when things do come before us, we'll be ready to look at them, review them carefully, make sure that they're not going anything beyond what's required by law.
Thank you. Next. Yeah, we'll have a couple more questions. Given the strong opposition to the asphalt plant, will you support changes to the plant that monitor support challenges to the plant, monitor vigorously, and hold the line on variances and permits? Mr. Galvin.
Yes. I'm very familiar with that plant. I voted against it the entire time, did not approve the settlement, and we have a monitoring plan in place now. That plan is very important. That plan has to be enforced. I am prepared to support efforts to enforce if necessary, to pull the permit if there's no compliance on that agreement. And that agreement has to be watched. It has to be watched carefully and very scrupulously. And I think it's a major responsibility that this board has to the folks in the Nabnasset area, which was Precinct 6. I just want to correct that. So when I referenced Precinct 6 earlier, I was talking about Nabnasset. They're very concerned about this, and we need to be able to back them up.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate circumstance. On the school committee, we actively took a position against this and weighed in with the planning board and with the zoning boards to say that we were concerned about it. So not a situation we want to be in, but here we are. I think there is a plan that's fairly well defined. I think we have to be ready to, we not only need a good plan, we need to make sure the plan's resourced, and I think we need to make sure that it's transparent so that you as members of the community have ways to look and see, yes, we do have these things resourced. All of the things that are defined in the plan are being attended to carefully, and I think that you need to have that voice and that feedback. And as soon as there's anything that strays beyond the tight controls that are there, we need to be ready to act quickly. The problem that you could run into is if you don't resource it right, it's not transparent, you could find out things too late and not be in a position to stop it right there at the bud and make sure that we're making this as safe as we possibly can.
Thank you. Ms. Almeida.
So the asphalt plant is the first issue that I began asking questions about when I decided to run for the Board of Selectmen. And one of my first meetings was with Chris Clutchman, who is the town employee who's working on the enforcement of this. And so she explained all the steps of the enforcement to me. And what I think we need is to know that our town employees are enforcing it to the strictest level possible and that the selectmen will support them in that. And the second part of that is to communicate with the public so that you know that the settlement is being enforced. And what I asked from Mrs. Clutchman was for information on that, something I could share. And she typed up a 2-page summary, which this goes back to information being consumable, because we know that the settlement is complicated, and there are a lot of details to that, and I'm guessing that many of us don't have time to sit down and read through stacks and stacks of paper of those details, but we want to know that the settlement is being enforced. And so what I would expect and ask for is that the town provide regular updates to the community of how the settlement's being enforced, what those standards are, and that you have confidence that it's being enforced.
Thank you. Our final question, which if you have the answer to this, you got the answer to everything. How do you raise revenue without increasing residential property tax? Mr. Clay.
So there actually is a good answer to this, and it's looking at the other source of revenue besides your taxes, which is developing the business area. So serving in the Marlborough Economic Development Council, there's a ready report card on what the occupancy rates are, what the hotel nights are, what the restaurant nights are. And so there's a ready report card all the time saying how are we doing, making best use of the space, bringing the right corporate citizens that can contribute not just taxes but volunteer in the schools and bring their talents in other ways. I think that there's a relatively low occupancy right now in our industrial property, and I think we need to take the existing zone business area and really look at making the most out of it. And I've seen some tools very effectively used in Marlborough that I'd like to bring to Westford, and that team has offered to come and provide all kinds of resource and coaching to help us work on that together.
Mr. Galvin.
Okay, thank you. First, before I comment, I did read the 1,000 pages that were involved in the enforcement. I'm very familiar with it, and I think that would help me out when we have to deal with that issue. I would recommend or say I see 5 potential processes or ways that we could probably improve some revenue without having to raise property taxes. The first, I would agree with Mr. Clay, is to encourage commercial development in the proper locations. We need to be able to make sure we do that. One of the things we should not do is give tax deferments to businesses that want to relocate here. We have a very good tax rate where even with residential, there's no need for us to deflect taxes for 10 or 12, 13 years. We need that revenue. Second of all, we need to look at our review our staffing and procurement issues within our town departments. Most importantly, we need to start to develop a really working relationship with our state representative to get us our local aid back, as well as to be able to deal with less mandates on our schools and on other parts of our government. It's very important that we establish a legislative agenda. And lastly, I would be willing to explore, to a limited degree, regionalization in some type key areas. Not key areas, but in areas that I think it would work.
Thank you. Ms. Almeida.
Sure. So we know for increased revenue, we've heard about development on 110, also the commercial end of Route 40. We can also look at neighborhood businesses. I know in the villages, there are empty commercial spaces where if we have an appropriate business, such as a small diner, the breakfast shops that have opened recently, that could help generate revenue and help create community in those neighborhoods. I'm a small business owner. I would like to look for ways that we can support the small businesses in town and even help them grow and become larger businesses here in town. And then I think as we're talking about increasing revenue, we also have to give equal consideration to how can we manage what we're spending, even reduce what we're spending, and take a hard look at our budget every year as we go through the budgeting process. I've really enjoyed running for Board of Selectmen. It's been a terrific process to get to know so many folks in town. And I wanted to close with something that is written in the town report. If you read closely, there is a poem in the middle of the annual report this year. And it ends with this beautiful line: volunteers and town staff are deserving of praise. The results that they get never cease to amaze. We're so very grateful for all those who give so that Westford can be such a great place to live. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to our selectmen candidates.
Thank you, Joanne.
And you may be released from the hot seats. And the candidates for school committee should come down. All right, I will try to yell louder. I'm hearing I'm not yelling loud enough. So take that as a cue. We'll follow the same format: 2-minute opening, 1-minute responses to questions. We'll just go down. It's all repeated information. Start at this end, and then it will be random. Go ahead, Ms. Eckroth.
Okay, first I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and all of you for watching and attending. This process has been really wonderful in seeing how available information is to our Westford voters, and I've just loved, it's been very eye-opening and encouraging to see how many ways there are to get involved. My name is Megan Eckroth. I've been a proud Westford resident for the last 6 years, along with my 2 daughters and my husband. My daughters have been benefiting from the Westford school systems for the last 6 years. I've been asked through this campaign process in 100 words or less, 4 minutes or less, to answer why I'm here, what my background is, why I would be the best candidate. So I thought tonight I would take a little different approach and try and tell you a little bit more about me. Whether we're sitting down at the dinner table or in the car driving to my in-laws in Maine, we often as a family, come up with questions for everyone to ask. And one of those questions is, if you could have a superpower, what would it be and why? And my answer is unwavering. I always say that I would choose to be invisible so that I could be a fly on the wall and be at school during my children's school day and see what it's like for them when they can't see me. And of course, my 8 and 10-year-old groan and roll their eyes and go, "Mom." But I've realized that that answer really speaks to a lot of why I'm here. That superpower wouldn't change. And the reason is because what I'm really trying to gain is an insight into their student experience. I want to know what motivates them. I want to know what environment they learn best in, where they feel most confident, what challenges they face, what that environment is like. Everything I've done in the last 10 years, professionally, volunteer-wise, with the town of Westford, with the schools, has really been about gaining that perspective and that insight. Whether I'm sitting in front of one of my 25 Girl Scouts, I lead 2 troops here in town, or sitting in front of a captive audience of 15 to 20 kids at the Maker Farm where I teach all summer, I feel like I get a magical view into that experience. How they learn best, where they feel most confident. Stop. I'm getting a cue to stop. Okay, so I guess I can't say anymore. Hopefully I'll get to revisit a little bit of that. But
Thank
the
you.
school committee is where I'd like to focus all of those efforts next in gaining insight into the student experience.
Thank you. Ms. Mallon.
Hi, my name is Alicia Curtin-Mallon, and for those of you who are not familiar with me, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I've lived in Westford for 11 years. I actually grew up in Boston, Dorchester to be specific, and that will become clearer the longer I talk tonight. So we moved to Westford 11 years ago, and we became a part of the Westford public school system in 2010 when my son was evaluated and entered into the integrated preschool, the Millennium Preschool. So from there I started, as I think most of us would agree we all did, volunteering with the PTO, and then I ended up on the general board, I ended up on the board of the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. I'm now in my 2nd year of the School Advisory Committee, and this past year I actually served on the steering committee for the Override Project. I have to say I'm always amazed and proud of how Westford doesn't just take the status quo as where we should be. We are constantly looking into innovating. We are constantly looking into changing, to diversifying. And I think as a community, we have an obligation to educate our children. We have a responsibility to educate them well. But we have the absolute privilege
to be a part of shaping and launching future citizens, our future voters, our future parents, our future teachers. And I think that is the most important role of the Westford School Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gloria Miller, and I'm a candidate for school committee. My husband Darren and I have lived in Westford for almost 10 years. We have 3 teenage daughters, an 8th grader, a high school junior, and a college freshman. And I've been an active volunteer in their schools and extracurriculars throughout their elementary, middle, and high school years. So my experience as a parent and my priorities as a candidate span all the years, K through 12. I'm looking forward to discussing important issues facing Westford Public Schools with you this evening. There are more details about issues I'm passionate about on my website, www.electgloriamiller.com. There are also there are written statements and video statements. I would like to thank Westford Eagle and Westford Cat for providing all of the candidates with those opportunities to communicate with voters. Also, of course, thank you to the library and to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. Thanks to the audience for being here, being engaged. Thanks to those who are watching at home. There have been some great discussions tonight, and I'm looking forward to this one. I feel that the schools are the foundation of this community. It's the reason my family moved here. It's the reason many families moved here. It's also the reason we'll never leave here. I really value living in a community that cares about education and that cares about its children. And I would like to put my background and apparent inability to say no to volunteer opportunities to work for you on the school committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, first question. What are the major challenges facing the Westford schools, and how should the school committee act on them? Ms. Mallon.
Well, I think one of our biggest challenges as a school system, as any school system, is a balance between academics and social emotional development. I think we are at an unprecedented point in education where social media and the positives and the negatives that can come with that are bigger than they ever have been. And we're seeing a creep where it's getting lower and it's getting closer and closer to the younger grades. And I think we really need to focus on raising media smart kids, raising strong, self-aware kids that know that they have people to reach out to. I know we've done excellent studies. We just had the results that came out a little while ago on our risk assessment. I'd like to see us go a little deeper into the younger grades and do more social emotional development and professional development to assist our children.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
There is a cornucopia of issues facing Westford Public Schools. Our teachers deal with so much every single day, and attending school committee meetings every other week, you will see that there's a huge variety of issues. I'll touch on a couple briefly. At the elementary level, I think a very large issue is class sizes. It's already been discussed this evening that there is significant development coming to town in the near future, and school committee have to keep a very watchful eye on that development to see how that's going to impact our elementary and other school populations. We need to be prepared to make adjustments in staffing so that classes are appropriately sized. So that's one issue at the elementary level. Really at all levels, I think STEM education is very important. We need to make sure that our kids are prepared for not just the jobs of today, but jobs of tomorrow.
Thank you. Ms. Eckroth.
I think to look at the issues that face the Westford schools, you have to look at really what we're doing so well today. The Westford schools are wonderful. People move here to choose the schools that we have today. We are doing a lot of things right. But I think that to maintain that quality of education with an ever-changing landscape of technology and social media and curriculum changes. Things are always changing. Teachers are always being asked, adapt to this new curriculum, integrate this new technology into your classroom. So I think that maintaining consistency in the quality of our education offering, in the class sizes, in the student experience for our kids is really important. And that trickles down all the way from high school down to K. I mean, we've been tackling this issue of full day kindergarten for the last 2 years. That really affects our little ones, and that affects the building utilization process and a potential redistricting. We don't have space, and yet we have the demand from a lot of families about kindergarten. Then you go all the way to 12th grade and talk about preparation for beyond college and lifelong skills.
Okay. Yes, it's the lightning round.
It is. The cards are very unsettling. So I was trying to look out one eye and talk with the other.
Next question. Do you support the override now faced by the town, and what ideas do you have for more broadly communicating this kind of information and its impact to residents, as well as, still related to the override, what would you do differently as a school committee member to prevent a future override? And then that's take that as you will. Ms. Miller.
I strongly support the school override question. I respect the additional tax burden this places on taxpayers, but I believe that correcting the teacher pay imbalance is vital to maintaining the strength of our schools for now and into the future. I think an override should be undertaken in exceptional circumstances. This problem developed a long time ago. As a parent, I first became aware of it in 2012 when I learned that our teachers were working without a contract. At that time, the teachers accepted a very unsatisfactory contract that did not even provide basic cost of living increases. But they did that to keep the town and the schools afloat during tough economic times. So the necessity for this override is a special situation and is not one that I would want to see repeated anytime in the near future.
Thank you. Ms. Eckroth.
I do strongly support the override. I think it is necessary, as many of you perhaps saw me speak at town meeting in favor of it. I grew up in the Acton-Boxborough School District, and my recollection, at least of being a child, was that my parents were constantly going to town meetings to vote on overrides every year, every other year. I'm not sure, I haven't kept up with the recent history as I wasn't there. That was many years ago. But this is the first override Westford has tried to pass in over a decade. And I think that speaks to the fact that this has been so well researched. This is the only way to fix this pay gap. And I think what a lot of voters and families don't understand or don't know the history of, and that would be something I would work towards as a school committee member, is to really get people to understand where the budget comes from and how we're operating. We operate on an extremely lean budget. Our per student spending is in the bottom 20% of the state, and yet we perform in the top 20. So it's not like we have all this money and we're trying to find ways to ask taxpayers to make up the difference.
Thank you. Ms. Mallon.
I think it will come as no surprise to anyone here that I also very much support the override. I do agree that an override should only be used in the most dire of circumstances. When I first joined the steering committee, it was the very first steering committee meeting. It was the first time parents were brought into the discussion, and when they said that the teachers had received a contract of 0%, 0%, 1%, my jaw hit the table. I grew up in a union household. My dad's a Boston firefighter. The idea of not even getting a cost of living increase is stunning. That aside, I know how tight the Westford School Department budget is. We do operate in the bottom 20% spending per student. However, we have a responsive classroom, we have response to intervention, we are extremely efficient. And while I very much understand not wanting taxes to go up, nobody does, I think in the long term, property values are based on who you can bring to town and whether or not you can bring people to town at all.
Okay. Next question. How do you recommend redistricting in Westford to make sure all school buildings are not over or underutilized? Ms. Eckroth.
That is a complicated question to ask with those time cards going. So redistricting has been on the table and in discussion for many years now. Obviously, with new development in town, and it's evident in the numbers, I serve on the School Advisory Council at Nabnasset and have for the last 3 years. Nabnasset is one of our more crowded schools. We are at capacity. Those classrooms, we are moving the REACH program away from NAB next year to accommodate another full-day kindergarten classroom. There's constant reshuffling going on. So it is a problem. It is a very real problem. There are many ways. Redistricting is an emotional issue. People are connected to the cultures of their schools, and it's a difficult thing to do, but it affects all of us. And I think you have to take the approach that we're all in this together. It's affecting every resident, every student, every school is going to change. There's talk of perhaps going to a K-5 model. Certainly there's some efficiencies in that, but there's also some risks you take of changing the landscape and the culture of maintaining that K2 and 3-5 model.
So you can finish your sentence.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
I know, it is a little.
I've never had such power.
Ms. Mallon.
As Megan mentioned, the REACH classroom, I think she is very correct. Redistricting is a very emotional issue. And I can tell you, if I was told I had to leave NAB, they would have to drag me out of there. I love NAB. I love that my children have had the experience they've had. Now, the REACH classroom, for those of you who are not familiar, is the substantially separate classroom for kids on IEPs or 504s, for quiet testing, for OT, for behavioral breaks. And this is the second time a REACH classroom has been bumped. And the way it stands now, you have kids going from Miller to Crisafully to Stony Brook, which means you've got our most vulnerable to transition population moving through 3 different social groups, which it's not sustainable. I think it is a very emotional issue, and I think we are all going to have to sit down and look at the map and figure out the best way to equally divide, because there is an imbalance, and it has been mostly NAB and Abbott who have been overcrowded.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
There are obviously emotional attachments to schools, but there has been discussion about potential redistricting. There has been discussion about whether it would be possible to close a school building. I think the most important thing for the school committee is never to undertake any change like that, which is dramatic, without full communication, community input, community consultation, and slowly and deliberately. We don't want to redistrict or close a building prematurely. There are significant economic costs involved in closing a building or with any redistricting project. And if, for example, a building was closed prematurely and then there's new growth in town with the new development and that building needed to be reopened, the reopened building would have to comply with all modern building codes for schools. Those costs would be exorbitant. So I think the most important thing for the school committee to do is to make sure that they're long-range planning and only undertaking such a redistricting change very slowly and deliberately.
Okay, next question. And I'm not aware if this is a faux pas to ask this question, so what will your selection criteria be for a new superintendent should Bill Olson retire during your term? Ms. Mallon.
Time marches on, and eventually Bill Olson will have to retire. Personally, I've sat on a hiring committee at NAB for a long-term substitute, so I know that it's a long process, it's an involved process. Personally, knowing that Westford is such an effective school district, I would like to look within first. I think we have a lot of quality leadership, not just in the superintendent's office, but also in our schools themselves. I think I'm going to be looking for, if I should be so lucky to be elected, I'm going to be looking for someone who wants to innovate, someone who does have STEM goals, someone who has diversity goals, someone who has social emotional goals, someone who will push Westford forward in the direction we are already going so that we can continue to provide for our students with these processes that we already have.
Thank you. Ms. Eckroth.
Could you repeat the question for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
What will your selection criteria be for a new superintendent if Bill Olson retires during your term?
So I think that this is perhaps one of the most important vetting processes that we would go through. I mean, we're talking about someone who really governs the course of our entire school system, you know, through what they feel is important, how they guide the school committee. And I think Bill's wonderful, and I wouldn't dare to name any sort of names or anything like that in his replacement should he retire. But I think that it really is an opportunity to explore all of the things that currently affect the schools, as well as things that are going to affect the schools in the future, 5-10 years down the road. And getting that information out of somebody about how they feel about technology in a classroom, how they feel about things like maker spaces. I mean, I think there really can't be enough questions asked and criteria to fulfill to find out if this person is the best person for the culture and the direction, and has the not necessarily the experience of having been a superintendent or assistant superintendent, but the intent to bring our schools in a direction we as a community would like to go. Thank you. Ms. Miller.
Did Bill's wife submit this question? If such an issue were to arise, in what seems like a former life, I was an attorney. I've worked as a corporate attorney in the court system, and I've also taught legal practice at both Wayne State and the University of Michigan Law Schools. As part of all of those positions, I was often in the position of hiring and interviewing candidates. I think that replacing such a long-term servant to the Westford Public Schools would be a difficult task, and that picking a replacement would be somewhat akin to the process that seniors go through when they pick a college. It's not about picking the college with the best food or the highest ranking. It's about picking a college that fits you, that is a good match between student and college. I think it would be somewhat the same in picking a new superintendent. It has to be the right fit for our school system and for our town.
Thank you. Next, what is your decision-making, budgeting, and teamwork experience that makes you qualified to represent residents? Ms. Eckroth.
Decision, budget making,
And teamwork.
And teamwork. So, decision, budget making, and teamwork. I just want to make sure I hit all of those. Budget making and teamwork. Okay, so let's start with teamwork, because I think that's really important. We're talking about 7 members of the school committee and the superintendent, assistant superintendent, with perhaps differing viewpoints coming at it from different angles. I have served on the school advisory council at Namnasset, as I said, for the last 3 years. And that is a team. That is a team of revolving. It changes every year. Staff, the principal, and parents. I work within the community of Westford Girl Scout leaders, and we come at it from all different angles. You know, we're all there together for a common purpose. So I think teamwork is really inherent to who I am. I think that is how I approach really everything I do. I'm a great listener. I want to know everyone's viewpoint. Everyone's viewpoint, I think, deserves respect. Budgeting and decision making. I think, with that said, I certainly have opinions, and I can be decisive and come to the table with the background information and everything that I need to make an informed decision on behalf of the Westford residents and parents interested in the school systems.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
Did I mention I was the mom of 3 teenage girls? There's a lot of decision-making, budgetary guidance, and teamwork that have to go into that. More specifically, certainly in some of my volunteer efforts, I've volunteered with Blanchard Theater Arts, with Westford Academy Theater Arts. You quickly learn as a theater parent that theater is a team sport and takes a village, and sometimes that also involves parent help. I'm also the secretary of Westford Academy Last Night. And Last Night, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, it's the all-night substance-free celebration for our Westford Academy graduating seniors. That is a huge undertaking and certainly involves fundraising and limited budgetary constraints and lots of teamwork. There are over 250 volunteers that come together to make that night happen and to keep our seniors safe. So I have had experience in those areas.
Thank you. Ms. Mallon.
I'm going to answer all 3 with my volunteer experience. I've spent 3 years now, just about 4, on the Special Education Parent Advisory Council as their secretary-treasurer. Now, that budget is not necessarily scary because it's teeny tiny. But I've also spent a lot of time with our PTOs. I'm a general board member for the Nabnasset PTO. I run the school store there. There's budgeting, and spy pens. And I ran the Crisafulli Book Fair this year. I'm the chair for Cookies Crew. So I've worked extensively, not just with the Nabnasset PTO, but also with the Crisafulli PTO. And I've seen the process from the inside, and I've seen what it takes to weigh what is best for the school, what is best for the community as a whole, how far can we get our budget to stretch, and how exactly can we work within not just our PTO, but other PTOs to get the most we can for our students. So I think my volunteer experience will help me with that.
Okay, a final question. Do you feel it is important to change the high school and middle school to a later start time? Ms. Miller.
Ooh, I love this one. There is a mental health issue at Westford Academy that also extends down into younger grades, but it's an important issue. Mental wellness and well-being at our high school is an issue that has to be closely monitored and addressed. In this year's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, high school students reported, 13% of our high school students reported that they had seriously considered suicide at some point in the prior year. That's a disturbing statistic. To counterbalance that statistic is another one that that 80% of students did feel that they had a trusted adult in the building they could go to. I know this went a little off topic from later start time, but one of the things that a later start time does, there's significant research and evidence out there that it does help with mental health and well-being, and I think that's one of the reasons, although it would be complicated, we have to actually consider it because we need to support our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Mallon.
I agree. There are several studies that show us that the teenage brain just functions differently than an adult brain. As you grow and as your brain changes, there are definite differences. And as adults, we function fairly well based on alarms and schedules, but teenage brains are definitely ruled by their serotonin levels. There's extensive research that says that this is a good idea. I definitely think we should look into it. I think it's something to consider, and I do think there's a lot of factors to consider. There's extracurricular programs, there's the other schools in town, there's bus routes. There is not just anecdotal evidence to support it, but I think if we do look into it, and I do think we should, we need to look at the surrounding communities and other school districts that have done it as well. Because if we start changing our start time and our finish time, that's going to affect all of our extracurriculars, all of our co-curriculars, which, let's be honest, are very important to students as well, especially in maintaining social connections and mental well-being.
Thank you. Ms. Eckroth.
So in the last year, Westford schools have adopted, or I shouldn't say adopted, have implemented the Challenge Success Program, which is a program out of Stanford University that is really focused on the social emotional well-being of all students. Currently it focuses on 6th through 12th grade. We recently administered a survey to those students asking a number of questions about their mental health and social emotional well-being and feelings about school. And one of the factors that they look at is school start times. So this is not a new topic. This is not something that's newly affecting Westford or, frankly, the Dual County League, which is what we participate in for sports. Acton Boxborough, I'll reference again, is not only where I grew up, but my sister is running for school committee there. So I get to find out a bit about the inner workings of their district as well. And they have adopted the Challenge Success Program as well. They're a year further into it than we are. And they compete in the same extracurricular sports team activities as we do. Many of those schools are looking into this. So it could be really a matter of logistics. Do we have to do this in order to make all of this work? But yes, I think it's beneficial certainly to look into for those students.
All right. Well, thank you to our candidates for school committee.
I would
close
like
at the
to
beginning by saying
thank
we're still
Joanne
trying to be
Berry
sitting
for
here.
moderating this evening. Everyone give her a big hand. Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for participating and to the many league members who worked to make this evening possible. For those in the audience, I please ask you if you could remain seated just for the statement from Tom Spuler, who is running for the planning board. And remember to vote on Tuesday, May 2nd. Thank you.